In 2012, Singapore amended its laws to exempt some offenses from the mandatory death sentence. Executions in Singapore are carried out by long drop hanging, and they usually take place at dawn. 33 offenses, including murder, drug trafficking, terrorism, use of firearms and kidnapping, warrant the death penalty under Singapore law. Section 316 of the Criminal Procedure Code states that the death penalty in Singapore is to be conducted by hanging. Hangings always take place at dawn and are conducted by the long drop method. The Singapore government has affirmed its choice of execution by hanging in favor of other methods. It is a normal practice for everyone present in the courtroom to stand and remain silent before the death sentence is passed. The judge will then proceed to announce the death sentence on the accused, who has been found guilty and convicted of the capital offense. The condemned will be given notice at least 4 days before execution. In the case of foreigners sentenced to death, their families and diplomatic missions or embassies will be given 1 to 2 weeks' notice. In Singapore, persons under the age of 18, at the time of their offense, and pregnant women cannot be sentenced to death. Previously, offenders under 18 at the time of their offenses would be indefinitely detained at the President's pleasure, with the normal period of detention having been between 10 and 20 years. These inmates would be released after receiving clemency from the President of Singapore, once they were assessed to be suitable for release. In 2010, the law was amended to allow judges to mete out life imprisonment to offenders convicted of capital offenses, but aged below 18 at the time of their crimes. They would be required to serve a minimum of 20 years before they can be reviewed for possible release. As for women who were pregnant at the time of their sentencing, they would automatically be sentenced to life imprisonment upon their conviction of any capital offenses, though there have been no such cases as of yet. In July 2012, the government made a review of the mandatory death penalty applied to certain drug trafficking or murder offenses. In the midst of this review, a moratorium was imposed on all the 35 pending executions in Singapore at that time. During that period of the review of the mandatory death penalty, in November 2012, capital punishment laws in Singapore were revised such that the mandatory death penalty for those convicted of drug trafficking or murder was lifted under certain specific conditions. Judges were empowered with the discretion to sentence such offenders to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. These changes were approved by Parliament and set to take effect in January of the following year. On the 27th of July 1973, Singapore sent a woman to the gallows. Wong Sim Woh, more commonly known as Mimi Wong, was a Singaporean bar hostess who became the first woman to be sentenced to death for murder in Singapore since its independence. Mimi Wong, birth name Wong Sim Woh, was born in 1939 at Singapore, Straits Settlements. She was the offspring of her father's second wife. Mimi Wong never went to school because her family could not afford it. Wong had an unhappy childhood since her birth. Wong's father died of unknown causes when she was 11 months old. Her biological mother, Lang Quan Fong, was so poor that she was unable to continue taking care of Wong, which led to her being sent to live with her father's first wife Hoa Suing and her 9 half-siblings. Other than poverty, Wong suffered abuse from Ho and her siblings, who verbally and physically abused her at every moment, even at times in the presence of Wong's birth mother. Whenever it was mealtime, Wong's 9 half-brothers and half-sisters were allowed to eat first, while Wong was not allowed to join them. She would only be given leftovers once the whole family finished eating. In 1956, the year she turned 17, Wong met a HDB sweeper named Sim Woh Kum, who was 6 or 7 years older than her. Soon both Wong and Sim became romantically involved. The couple dated for the next 2 years before they married in 1958. In that same year, both Wong and Sim welcomed their first son. In 1963, the couple decided to separate. After her separation from Sim Woh Kum, Wong Sim went on to work as a cabaret girl in a bar, adopting a stage name Mimi Wong. Using her good looks and slender, sexually attractive figure, Wong quickly earned popularity among the male customers of the bar. Wong's reputation was so huge that she even became the queen of all bar hostesses in Singapore. In 1966, 3 years after she first started her bar hostess career, Wong first met Hiroshi Watanabe, an engineer and high-ranking member of a Japanese corporation. Wong and Hiroshi started an affair even though Hiroshi was a married man. On the 6th of January 1970, Wong and Hiroshi shared a dinner at their Everett Roadhouse. Wong asked Hiroshi if he could spend the night with her. Hiroshi declined, saying that he would be working overtime, and once he finished his work for the day, he would go back to Jalan Seaview to spend the night with his family. Upon hearing this, Wong realized this was a good chance for her to get back at Ayako, the wife of her lover Hiroshi. Both Wong and Sim went together to the Jalan Seaview house where the Watanabes were spending the night. Wong brought along a pair of gloves and a knife, while Sim took a tin half filled with toilet cleaning liquid, in order to pretend to be a toilet cleaner coming to clean the house. When Ayako saw Wong and Sim, she asked the woman what she wanted. After hearing Wong telling her that she had brought a worker to repair a broken toilet basin, Ayako allowed them in. Both Wong and Sim started attacking Ayako and stabbing her to death in front of her children. Hiroshi Watanabe returned later that night. He went inside the house and was shocked to see his 3 children crying over the corpse of his deceased wife, which sent the 37-year-old mechanical engineer into hysterics. Hiroshi then asked his daughter what had happened, and Chico told him that she saw Wong and a man she did not know attacking her mother. Police were contacted. The investigations led to the police arresting both Wong and Sim the next day. Wong and Sim were both identified out of an identification parade by Chico, who would become the prosecution's key witness against the couple in their trial. Wong and Sim were charged with Ayako's murder. In November 1970, the trial of Mimi Wong and Sim Woh Kum began to take place. At the trial, both Wong and Sim accused each other of masterminding the murder. Wong accused her husband for being the sole person who killed Ayako. She said that when she was fighting in the toilet with Ayako, Sim separated them both, and he stabbed the victim when she left the bathroom. Aside from this, she even put up a defense of diminished responsibility, stating that she was intoxicated with alcohol at the time of the crime. Additionally, Wong's psychiatrist, Dr. Wang Yip-chong, also claimed that she had caught the Japanese encephalitis virus from Hiroshi and thus suffered from a viral brain infection at the time of the killing, which impaired her mental responsibility. However, the prosecution psychiatrist stated that Wong was of sound mind when she killed Ayako. After a trial lasting 26 days, on the 7th of December 1970, High Court judge pronounced the verdict in court. Wong and Sim were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death for murdering Ayako Watanabe. After numerous failed appeals on the 27th of July 1973, nearly 3 years and 7 months after murdering Watanabe and 5 days after losing her plea for clemency, 34-year-old Mimi Wong and her 40-year-old husband Sim Woh Kum were both hanged at dawn. Before she was executed, Wong requested to die while wearing her wedding gown from her past marriage with Sim. Her final wish was granted, and thus she wore it as she entered the gallows. After her execution, Wong was buried side by side with Sim in an unspecified cemetery. In the aftermath of the case, both Mimi Wong and Sim Woh Kum were considered to be the first couple to be sentenced to death and executed in Singapore since its independence. Simultaneously, Wong was also the first woman to be subjected to capital punishment in Singapore since its independence from both British colonial rule and Malaysia. Her case gained notoriety since its occurrence, and it was considered to be one of the most shocking murder cases which Singapore had faced in its years as an independent nation. Thank you for watching Death Row.